Hello everyone. Welcome back to lesson 3 of module 1 of Elements of Mechanical Engineering. In the last lesson, we did discuss about renewable sources of energy and its conversion, especially solar energy and its conversion. So, in this lesson, we'll further take you towards few more renewable or non-conventional energy sources and its conversion. So, one of the important renewable source is wind energy. So in the last class we did discuss sun is the main source for all the energy requirement. So even the wind energy, the prime requirement for that is also a solar energy. So what is wind energy? So we know that as the wind blows, it blows with some kinetic energy. So wind possesses kinetic energy. Because of the kinetic energy, we will be able to feel the breeze of the wind. So kinetic energy is, as you know, that it is associated with the movement of a large quantity or large masses of air. That air which is blowing or which is flowing with an high kinetic energy or the velocity energy, why can't we make use of it and run a fan or a turbine? Isn't it? So any device that is capable of slowing down the movement of air and extract kinetic energy possessed by that air and convert that into more useful work, then definitely we would be able to use it. A typical oldest conversion process of wind energy into mechanical energy is the windmill. It is the oldest device which was built to convert the wind energy into mechanical energy. Earlier, it was basically used for grinding operation, milling operation, as well as pumping water in our farms. So nowadays, we are making use of that windmill to convert that into mechanical energy. In turn, mechanical energy can be converted into electrical energy. Now, a typical windmill that is in use is as you can see in this particular sketch. So windmill, basically it has got three blades in it, which we call it as a rotor blade, and it is being fixed over an hub known as a rotor hub. So you can just see that this is the hub region and these are the rotor blades. And projecting out of this rotor hub, what you can see is a shaft, and you have a gearbox and an electric generator there. So what normally we do means, so these wind blades are normally erected on a very high tower, and these towers are usually located in an hilly region or where we don't see any obstruction for the flow of wind. Normally these windmills cannot be erected in the urban areas because of tall or rise buildings, so there will be an obstruction for free movement of the air. When there is an obstruction for the free movement of air, we can't expect the kinetic energy that is required to run a rotor blade. So it is always recommended to erect this kind of windmill in an rural area, especially in the hilly region where there is no obstruction for the flow of wind. So when we erect this, you can just see an animation here. When they erect this particular kind of a windmill there, so high velocity air, so normally as we move up, so velocity of air will be high. So high velocity air, as it comes in contact with these kind of rotor blades, so kinetic energy possessed by the air or the wind is being absorbed by the rotor blades. So as the rotor starts absorbing the wind kinetic energy, it starts rotating. So that means to say the kinetic energy possessed by the wind is now being absorbed by the rotor blades, and in turn that kinetic energy makes the rotor blades to rotate. Since the rotor blade is being fixed over a rotor hub, the hub rotates. As the hub is being mounted over a shaft, the shaft rotates. That means to say the kinetic energy possessed by the wind is now being converted into rotary motion of the shaft, which is nothing but our mechanical energy. So once we can get this mechanical rotary motion, that in turn can be coupled with an electrical generator, and thereby we will be able to convert mechanical energy into electrical energy and use it for our purpose. So this is one of the most opted non-conventional or the renewable energy source where we are trying to extract the kinetic energy possessed by the wind and convert that into mechanical energy, in turn convert that into electrical energy. So why the wind possesses kinetic energy? Because of difference in the density. Why the difference in the density exists in the wind? Because of the solar radiation. So obviously across the globe, so all the parts of the globe is not uniformly heated. So one near towards the equator will be heated more compared to the northern and southern hemisphere. When there is a difference in the temperature, obviously that gives rise to difference in the density. When there is a difference in the density, obviously low density air will move away and high density air will push towards the hemisphere and thereby pushing the low density air towards the equator. That means an continuous wind currents are created between the equator and the northern and southern hemisphere. So why this is happening? Because of the solar radiation being incident on the earth, which gives rise to change or the difference in the temperature, change in the density, causing the wind current to move between the equator and the respective hemisphere. So that is how the wind gains the kinetic energy, and that kinetic energy we are converting that into mechanical energy, in turn into electrical energy by the use of windmill. Okay, so this is one of the energy source where we can trap and convert that into mechanical and in turn into electrical energy. Moving on to the next energy conversion process is the nuclear power. So nuclear fuels, as you know, it is naturally available in the earth crust like uranium. So why can't we make use of this uranium? So normally this nuclear fuels, it has to undergo a reaction process. What do you mean by reaction process? There are two types of reaction process. One, we know that it is an fusion reaction or a fission reaction. So what is fusion reaction? If two molecules are made to or fused together, so they are being fused together with an aid of an external force, then obviously they two fuse together and release enormous amount of heat. That is one reaction process. The other reaction process is fission reaction, just the reverse. So whereby an atom of this nuclear fuel is now being split. Okay, when it is being split, then also it releases enormous amount of heat. So in practice, we are concentrating more on fission reaction rather than the fusion reaction. So in the fission reaction, you can just see that if an uranium-235, which is a natural fuel, which is a natural nuclear fuel, which is available, if a neutron is made to hit this uranium, so obviously that uranium molecule or the uranium atom will split into two, and two will become four, and like that it will be a continuous chain reaction. So whenever it splits, so it will be releasing enormous amount of heat, and that heat energy we can utilize it for generating power. So how can we do it? So nuclear power, as of now, it's a clean and a very efficient way of converting into other energy forms. So how can we make use of it? So as I said, due to this fission reaction, enormous amount of heat is released. So what do we do with that heat? So using that heat, we'll try to boil the water. So the heat is so high enough or huge enough whereby the water gets converted into steam. So once we can get the steam, so we can run a steam turbine. So that means to say heat energy can be converted into mechanical energy by running a steam turbine. So mechanical energy is nothing but basically a rotary motion. So once we can get rotary motion from the running of this steam turbine, so obviously that in turn can be converted into electrical energy by coupling that with an generator. So in order to extract the energy possessed by the nuclear fuel, so we can go and build with a nuclear power plant. So let me explain you how this nuclear power plant works. So nuclear power plants are basically where we make use of uranium fuel. It undergoes a fission reaction, it releases enormous amount of heat, and that heat in turn is used to boil the water, and the boiled water gets converted into steam, and that steam is taken to the steam turbine, and thereby we run the steam turbine, which delivers mechanical energy. So that mechanical energy in turn is coupled with a generator to generate electrical energy. So this is the schematic diagram of how a typical nuclear power plant looks. You can just see this. This is what we call it as a nuclear reactor. In this nuclear reactor, you can just see there is a uranium fuel or uranium which is housed inside, and we have a reactor vessel as well as a control rod. So why we have a reactor vessel means where actually the fission reaction will take place. So inside this, as you know, that nuclear fuels are very dangerous because it emits radiations which is very harmful to the human beings as well as in general to the everyone. So therefore this fission reaction has to take place in a closed container. So that's the reason we call it as a containment building, so that there is no leakage of any radiations out of this fission reaction. So in order to do that, we will be carrying out this reaction process, that is fission reaction process, in a reactor vessel. And once we start this fission reaction, it's an uncontrollable. So it's a continuous chain reaction. So therefore, you have to control here now and then. So that's the reason we have a control rods which will give you a controlled fission reaction. So that means to say the fission reaction will take place here in the nuclear reactor. So a nuclear atom is now being split by the neutron. So what happens? Enormous amount of heat is released. So what do we do with that heat? As I said, the heat released by the nuclear vessel is now being transmitted to these steam generators. You can see there are two steam generators here. These steam generators carry cold water. Okay, so normally before we start with the process, these generators are filled with water, normal water it is filled with. So what happens? The heat is being transferred from the reactor vessel to the steam generators. So there is no direct contact. You can just see that through pipes this heat is being transferred, and from the pipe to the steam generator which contains the water, heat is transferred indirectly. So there is no direct mixing of the nuclear fuels and the water what we are using, isn't it? So what happens? Once it releases the heat is now being absorbed by the water stored in the steam generator. So what happens? Since enormous amount of heat is generated, it is sufficient enough to convert all this water into steam. So what happens? The steam are being stored at the top of these steam generators. So through these steam pipes or the steam lines, we will be taking out high pressure, high temperature steam to the steam turbine. You can just see this is the steam turbine. So high pressure, high heat or high enthalpy steam is taken. Enthalpy is nothing but heat content. So the steam which is entering the turbine is having high pressure and high enthalpy or high heat content in it. But in order to run a mechanical turbine, we require kinetic energy. But what we possess? Pressure energy and the heat energy. So using the nozzles, so we will be able to convert. So what is a nozzle? I did tell you that in the ideal power plant. So a nozzle is an convergent divergent device which converts pressure energy into velocity energy, which converts high pressure into high velocity. So the same kind of a nozzle we will be using here, so which converts high pressure, high enthalpy steam into high velocity or high in kinetic energy jet of steam. So that jet of steam will be coming out of the nozzle. It's a jet of steam. Jet means where it has got high kinetic energy or the velocity energy. So this high kinetic energy jet of steam will now hit these turbine blades here. As this hits the turbine blade, the kinetic energy is now being absorbed by these moving blades and they start rotating, and these blades are fixed or keyed over a shaft. As the blades rotate, the shaft also rotates. That means to say the energy possessed by the fuel was converted into heat energy, and that heat energy in turn was converted into mechanical rotary motion, which is nothing but our mechanical energy. And once we can get this mechanical energy, so in turn it can be coupled with a generator to generate electricity. So mechanical energy in turn is converted into electrical energy, and using the transformation line, the transformer and all those things, we can take it out, we step down it or whatever, depending on our requirement, we will be taking it out for usage. So then what is the purpose of all this condenser, the cooling tower and all those things? So this process, it should be a continuous process. So what happens? The steam which gives away all the energy to this in the form of a kinetic energy. So what happens? In the turbine, it is giving out all the kinetic energy. So once it gives out all the kinetic energy, so what is coming out of the turbine is a wet steam. It is a two-phase mixture. It is not a steam. It is a wet steam. Wet steam is which has got both vapor molecules as well as water molecules in it. So, and moreover, it will be having somewhat moderate temperature, low pressure. Pressure will be low, temperature will be moderate, right? So what happens, that need to be recirculated back. We have to take it back to the reactor vessel, because while coming out, it came out as an high temperature, high pressure steam. So using nozzle, we converted that into low pressure, high kinetic energy jet of steam. So that energy is now being given to the turbine blades. So in turn, mechanical and electrical we generated. So what is the exhaust of the turbine? The exhaust of the turbine will be, after giving out all the energy, it will be an wet steam, which is a two-phase mixture, which has both vapor content as well as water content in it. So that need to be recirculated back into the reactor vessel. So how can we do that? So that means we have to reduce the temperature of that wet steam further. So wet steam has to be converted into water back, so that it can be pumped back into the reactor and we can recirculate the same water again and again. So how to do this? So wet steam, still it is having a moderate temperature. It is a wet steam. It is not a water that need to be converted into water. How can we do it? Only if you reduce the temperature of the wet steam, so wet steam gets converted into water. So how can we do it? So by spraying a cold water, so we can make the steam to lose temperature further. As the wet steam loses temperature further, it gets converted into liquid form, which is water. So that is the reason why we make use of this condenser. So condenser is a device whereby there is an exchange of heat from the wet steam to the water. So that is what we call it as condenser. Condenser means the steam is condensing, steam is losing heat, and thereby getting converted from vapor state to liquid state. So in order to do that, we will be pumping the cold water to it. So the cold water which is passing through this condenser will take away the heat from the wet steam, and the wet steam gets converted into water again, and the same water is pumped back into the reactor, and this process will continue again and again. So what happens to this water? The cold water we had taken in, so it was a cold water having low temperature, but once it takes away the heat from the wet steam, the temperature of the water increases. The cold water, while entering it was a cold water, while coming out of the condenser it will be a warm water. So what do we do with it? Because here also we will be going for recycling the same water. So what do I do? What should I do? We are taking in cold water, but we are taking out warm water. So if I want to recirculate, so what should be the inlet? Inlet should be in cold water. So what should I do? So the warm water has to be converted back into cold water. So what can I do? So using this cooling tower, we will be able to convert warm water back into cold water and recirculate here again and again. So this cooling tower, it's a very simple structure. It is nothing but a concrete high-rise structure. So we just take out this warm water to an higher height. We make that warm water to fall from an higher height. If you make an hot water to fall from an higher height, so obviously it will be giving away the heat possessed by the warm water into the surrounding air, and thereby it loses its heat, isn't it? So that is what we are making here. So we are taking the warm water here, pumping up, and we are making the warm water to fall from an higher altitude. As it falls from an higher altitude, it gives away the heat, and thereby warm water gets converted into cold water, and the same cold water is recirculated again and again. This is how a nuclear power plant works in case of non-conventional energy sources, where we are making use of nuclear fuel like uranium and converting that into mechanical energy, in turn into electrical energy. This is how a nuclear power plant works. Now let us move on to next category of non-conventional energy sources, which is an alternate to our fossil fuels. So fossil fuels we had discussed in the last class. So like formation of petroleum, formation of coal, and the formation of natural gas, so which do exist in the earth. So why don't we come out with an alternative to those fossil fuels? So alternate to those fossil fuels are the biofuels. So what are biofuels? So biofuels are nothing but the fuels which we are trying to make artificially from all the biological waste or the biological mass that is there on earth. So normally we have crops like sugarcane, starch, corns, potatoes, oil seeds, crops, soya beans, sunflower, and animal fats, many other biological waste or biological mass. Why can't we make use of that? And in line with the fossil fuels, why can't we make or why can't we prepare an artificial fuel? And since we are making use of biological waste, we can term it as biofuels. Just like we have solid fuel, liquid fuel, and the gaseous fuel in case of a fossil fuel, here also we can artificially make biofuels like solid biofuels, liquid biofuels. Under liquid biofuels, we have bioalcohols and the biodiesel as well as gaseous biofuels. So we'll discuss one by one. So what is solid biofuel? Solid biofuel, it is nothing but like wood or sawdust or grass trimmage, domestic refuse, charcoal, agricultural waste, non-food crops, dried manure. So these are all some of the solid biofuels which we have been using it. When a raw biomass is already available in the form of wood, in the form of sawdust, so that we can directly take it, we can burn it. That means combustion process, it releases heat. That heat can be used for our purpose, either to eat something or to convert that into any other form. There are some solid biofuels which cannot be used in the raw form. So what we do is normally we convert that into a small pellet kind of a thing. So normally 1 to 3 centimeters of small pellets will be used, and those pellets can be burnt in either in a stove or in an furnace kind of a thing where we just burn that. So these are some of the examples of the solid biofuels which we have been using nowadays. One more type of biofuels under liquid category is bioalcohols and the biodiesel. So where we get bioalcohols? So bioalcohols are normally extracted from the microorganisms and enzymes through the fermentation of sugar or starches or cellulose. The most important bioalcohols which we have been using at present are the bioethanol, biomethanol, and biobutanol. Biobutanol is also known as biogasoline, and this you do not have to do. You can directly use this biogasoline because it is an immediate replacement for the gasoline oil which we have been using it. But except this biobutanol, the bioalcohol like bioethanol and biomethanol cannot be directly used. It has to be mixed with our regular petrol, and there is a maximum mixing of up to 15%. If you take 1 liter of petrol, out of that 1 liter, 850 ml of petrol can be used. Another 150 ml of this bioethanol or biomethanol can be mixed with that and used. So you cannot completely run an engine on a bioethanol or a biomethanol. So it has to be mixed with. So that is what we call it as blending. So we blend this biomethanol and biomethanol with the petrol and we can use it. Okay, and these bioethanol and biomethanol, they have got high octane number. They have got very high octane number due to which we can expect high compression ratio in the engine, and due to this high compression ratio we can expect high or more efficient thermal efficiency. So that means to say we will be able to extract maximum amount of heat from these kind of fuels. So biomethanol is currently being produced from the natural gas, and it is the most opted or suitable non-renewable fossil fuel. Okay, so therefore it is actually an alternate to the hydrogen. So one more type of liquid biofuel is the biodiesel. So biodiesel are normally extracted from plants, seeds by a process known as a transesterification process. So normally we can extract oil from the seeds, plants, animals, fish, but there is a restriction for extracting the oil from this because there are some seeds, there are some vegetables, animals which are Edible means which are being consumed by the human being. So there is a restriction for extracting oil from the edible seeds or edible ingredients which is required for the human race. So if all the human requirement is converted into oil, what will the human being eat? So there is a restriction for extracting oil from the edible ingredients like edible seeds and edible plants or edible animals and fishes. So there are some non-edible seeds from where we can extract this biodiesel, especially like Jatropha, Pongamia, soya, rapeseed. So there are many other plants and algae which are not consumed by the human being. So that kind of plants or that kind of seeds can be used, and where we can take it through a transesterification process and convert that into a diesel. So here also we cannot 100% run an engine on a biodiesel. So there are certain blends, and research is still going on what is the maximum percentage of blend of biodiesel which we can use it. So that research is still going on. So these are all nothing but the alternates. So alternate to our petrol and diesel, the bioalcohol and the biodiesels are the alternates to the our regular petrol and the diesel. And one more type of biofuel as a gaseous form is our biogas or the bio plant, or in general we just simply call it as a gobar gas plant. So what do? All the solid waste like animal waste, human waste, all those things can be dumped in an well underground. So there, in the absence of oxygen, so we call it as an anaerobic reaction. Anaerobic means in the absence of oxygen, all this bio waste, it might be in human waste, it might be in animal waste, all this solid waste, when it is being dumped in a well below the earth surface, so where it is being subjected to high temperature, and in the absence of oxygen, this undergoes a chemical transition, and thereby it starts liberating a gas, and normally it liberates methane gas, and that methane gas can be named as a gaseous biofuel, and which we have been using it as a gobar gas. So these are some of the biofuels which we can artificially prepare and which acts as an alternative fuel for our regular conventional fossil fuel like petrol, natural gas and the coal. Now let's move on to the other issues what we are facing with our energy conversion process. So non-conventional energy sources in general, it is very safe, non-polluting. But what about the conventional sources? So especially the fossil fuels, as you know, it undergoes a combustion process releasing enormous amount of heat. Not only the heat, it also releases certain products of combustion which we discussed, like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur oxide, nitrite oxide, lead and other particulate matter. And all these particulate matters are very harmful to the environment. Very harmful to the environment. So now let us discuss what are the effect of these fossil fuels on the environment. So especially we will discuss about the global warming and the ozone depletion. These are the two major issues which we have been facing because of extensive use of the fossil fuels, especially the petrol, diesel and the now coal, etc. So one of the major environmental issue is the global warming. So what are those environmental issues we are causing? All this because it is being created by the human activities which cause harm to the environment. What is that? Environmental issues are interconnected. If I do something else, something happens. We have been extensively using these fossil fuels for every activity, for every day-to-day life. In turn, these are all releasing green gases which are affecting the health of our earth. The two major environmental issues what I will be discussing here is the global warming and the ozone depletion. So what is global warming? So global warming, as you are aware, it is nothing but the gradual increase in the average temperature of the Earth's atmosphere. So day by day, the temperature of the Earth is increasing. So this is what we call it as global warming, and it is also known as climate change. What is happening? The average temperature of the Earth is rising day by day. Why is it rising? Because we are extensively using all these fossil fuels. When we burn this fossil fuel, when this fossil fuel undergo combustion process, it emits a lot of greenhouses. It emits a lot of greenhouses. Not only the fossil fuels, even greenhouses are emitted from our livestock like sheep, cattle, and all those things. What our plastics, and these are all emitting greenhouse gases like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfide, nitride oxide, lead, and other particulate matter, which is very harmful for the human being as well as for animals too. So what do we do with this? Why is it happening? Why is it happening? What are the effects of this global warming? So why is it happening? Because the plants and trees are very important for us, because those are the one which consume carbon monoxide and release fresh oxygen for us. Because of deforestation, we have been chopping off all the trees and plants. Deforestation is occurring everywhere. So because of deforestation, what is happening? We don't have the required trees which can consume carbon monoxide and release oxygen for us. Because of this deforestation, we are seeing droughts and floods. So because of deforestation, farming is affected. There is a shortage of food grains. Trees are not present. Carbon monoxide is not consumed. The required quantity of oxygen is not available. Because of our infrastructure, because if we want to increase our infrastructure, we want to make highways, expressways, and all those things, we are just chopping off all the trees. So this is what we call it as deforestation. Because of this deforestation, there is a change in the ecological cycle, due to which these droughts and floods are numerous. So what are the effects of this global warming? These are all caused by the increase in the carbon. When the trees are not present, this carbon dioxide, then chlorofluorocarbons, and other pollutants are remaining in the Earth's surface or in our atmosphere, due to which the temperature of our atmosphere keeps on increasing. Not only the floods. So how do floods occur? These glaciers, they melt down. The sea water level also increases. As you know that as the temperature increases, the density decreases. The sea water, as it receives more amount of heat, it decreases its density. Decreases its density means increase in the volume. So where will the water go? Water has to come to us, isn't it? So due to high temperature, the glaciers also melt, resulting in droughts, floods, etc. So rise in the sea level, decrease in the food production. When there's a decrease in the food production, obviously there will be a distribution of food grains will be a major problem. So because of all these things, the most affected is the human race and all the animals. So this is one of the important and most cascading effect what we can expect because of this global warming. So let me take you through this. You can just see here, these are the greenhouse effect. What is happening due to global warming? First of all, the light from the sun, the intensity of the solar radiations what we are receiving is very diluted, and moreover these gas houses are blocking all those things. We are not able to receive the required intensity of it. When the required intensity is not available, the temperature change will happen, isn't it? So these are some of the environmental issues which we should be concerned about. So please have a look of the global warming.
For 2.5 million years, the Earth's climate has fluctuated, cycling from ice ages to warmer periods. But in the last century, the planet's temperature has risen unusually fast, about 1.2 to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists believe it's human activity that's driving the temperatures up, a process known as global warming. Ever since the Industrial Revolution began, factories, power plants, and eventually cars have burned fossil fuels such as oil and coal, releasing huge amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases trap heat near the Earth through a naturally occurring process called the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect begins with the sun and the energy it radiates to the Earth. The Earth and the atmosphere absorb some of this energy, while the rest is radiated back into space. Naturally occurring gases in the atmosphere trap some of this energy and reflect it back, warming the Earth. Scientists now believe that the greenhouse effect is being intensified by the extra greenhouse gases that humans have released. Evidence for global warming includes a recent string of very warm years. Scientists report that 1998 was the warmest year in measured history, with 2005 coming in second. Meanwhile, readings taken from ice cores show that the greenhouse gases carbon dioxide and methane have hit their highest levels in the past 420,000 years. Arctic sea ice is also shrinking. According to NASA studies, the extent of Arctic sea ice has declined about 10% in the last 30 years. As long as industrialized nations consume energy and developing countries increase their fossil fuel consumption, the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will continue to rise. Researchers predict that temperatures will increase about 2 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. What's less certain is what rising temperatures mean for the planet. Some climate models predict subtle changes. Others forecast rising sea levels which could flood coastal areas around the world. Weather patterns could change, making hurricanes more frequent. Severe droughts could become more common in warm areas, and species unable to adapt to the changing conditions would face extinction. Although much remains to be learned about global warming, many organizations advocate cutting greenhouse gas emissions to reduce the impact of global warming. Consumers can help by saving energy around the house, switching to compact fluorescent light bulbs, and driving fewer miles in the car each week. These simple changes may help keep the Earth cooler in the future.
So one more environmental issues of concern is the ozone depletion. What is the ozone? Ozone is a natural colorless gas that is present in our atmosphere. Each ozone has got 3 atoms of oxygen, which we chemically denote it as O3, and ozone is found primarily in the 2 regions, so that you can see here it is present in 2 regions. So one is the inner region around the earth, which is around 0 to 10 kilometers from the earth's surface, which we call it as troposphere, and beyond that around 10 to 50 kilometers we have one more ozone layer, which we call it as a stratosphere. These are the 2 layers of ozone what you can see. So 10% of the ozone layer is made up of troposphere and remaining 90% is made up of stratosphere. So this troposphere is what we call it as the bad ozone, and the remaining 90% of stratosphere what we have is what we call it as a good ozone. What is this ozone? Why is it required? So this ozone is a preventive layer which prevents harmful ultraviolet radiations from the sun reaching the earth. What is happening? What is ozone depletion then? Ozone depletion means because of continuous decrease or gradual thinning of this ozone layer is what we call it as ozone depletion. That means the thickness of this ozone layer what we can see across the earth's surface, it is declining day by day. When it is declining day by day, so what happens? So it will no longer act as a barrier to block the UV radiations. Why is it happening? All these are all because of the emissions from the halogenated hydrocarbons, CFCs, HCFCs, and carbotetrachloride and methyl bromide. That is what happening. So this ozone layer, it acts as a protective shield, just like our sunscreen lotion. It blocks the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation reaching the Earth's surface. So why it is happening? Why it is thinning? All are man-made. All are man-made. So all are man-made because of this ozone depleting substances which we have been using. So that is the one which is decreasing or thinning the ozone layer. So thereby it will not be able to block this ultraviolet radiation, and these ultraviolet radiations will reach the human beings. So what are the disadvantages of this ultraviolet radiations? So this ultraviolet radiations, if you don't block it, it has got a serious cascading effect on the human health. If the ultraviolet radiations falls directly onto our body, this results in skin cancer, cataracts. It will destroy the agricultural products. It will destroy the food chain. It will reduce the reproductive rates on the earth. So these are the cascading effect. Why is it happening? Because we are using OD chemicals. What is OD chemical? Ozone depleting chemicals like aerosols, refrigerants, solvents, fire extinguishers, pesticides. So these we have been using extensively in our day-to-day life. Our air refrigerators, air conditioners. So these are the one which will be emitting all these CFCs, HCFCs and halogens and methyl bromide, which are very harmful to the ozone layer. And it is basically, as I said, ozone is made up of 3 oxygen molecules. It is separating it. Once it separates, obviously what happens, it is no longer a ozone. The density of that ozone keeps on diminishing. The thickness of the ozone decreases. It becomes thin. So thereby it will no longer act as a protective layer, and all these UV radiations from the sun will directly reach us, and thereby it is having a huge impact on the earth. So these are the 2 environmental issues of concern. One is the global warming, which is nothing but the increase in the average temperature of earth, which is resulting in droughts and floods. And the other one is an ozone depletion, nothing but the thinning of the ozone layer across the earth atmosphere. Thereby we will not be able to prevent the UV radiations reaching earth, which is having a cascading effect on the human health, all the human race as well as animals, on all our food products. So these are the 2 environmental issues which we are concerned with. So with this, I have come to the conclusion of energy and its conversion. So before I wind up, so just have a look on the ozone depletion.
15 to 35 kilometers above Earth's surface, a gas called ozone surrounds the planet. The ozone layer acts as a barrier between Earth and ultraviolet radiation from the sun. However, pollution has caused the ozone layer to thin, exposing life on Earth to dangerous radiation. Earth's atmosphere is made up of 6 layers. The second layer, called the stratosphere, contains the ozone layer. The ozone layer is made up of a highly reactive molecule called ozone, which contains 3 oxygen atoms. Ozone is a trace gas in the atmosphere. There are only about 3 molecules for every 10 million molecules of air. But it does a very important job. The ozone layer acts as Earth's sunscreen, absorbing about 98% of damaging ultraviolet or UV light. But the ozone layer has gotten thinner. Chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, are the primary culprits in ozone layer breakdown. A CFC is a molecule that contains the elements carbon, chlorine, and fluorine. CFCs are mostly found in refrigerants, aerosols, and plastic products. When CFCs are exposed to ultraviolet rays in the atmosphere, they break down into substances that include chlorine. The chlorine reacts with the oxygen atoms in ozone and rips apart the ozone molecule. Areas of damage in the ozone layer are often called ozone holes, but that name is misleading. Ozone layer damage is more like a thin patch, with the thinnest areas near the poles. The ozone layer above the Antarctic in particular has been impacted by pollution since the mid-1980s. There, the region's low temperatures speed up the conversion of CFCs to ozone-damaging chlorine. About 90% of CFCs currently in the atmosphere were emitted by industrialized countries in the Northern Hemisphere. In 1989, the Montreal Protocol banned the production of ozone-depleting substances. Since then, the amount of chlorine and other ozone-depleting elements in the atmosphere have been falling. Scientists estimate that chlorine levels will return to their natural state in about 50 years. By then, the Antarctic ozone hole will shrink to smaller than 8 million square miles.
So those are the two environmental issues which we are worried about. So in this particular lesson, we did learn about the wind energy and its conversion, nuclear energy and its conversion by the use of nuclear power plant, and the alternative fuels for the fossil fuel, namely the biofuels like bioethanol, biomethanol, biobutanol, or in general we call it as bioalcohols, biodiesel, and solid biofuels also. And apart from that, we did address the two environmental issues like the global warming and ozone depletion. So with these three lessons, we have covered the energy, the classification of energy, the forms of energy, and two types of energy conversion process, namely conventional sources or non-renewable sources, and the other side we have non-conventional sources or renewable sources. So under each category we have discussed its formation and its usage and how it can be converted from one form to another form. See you again in the next class. Thank you.